Nope. I'm stuck. Come on. Okay, we're in. Good. We are good. I'm going to put up the high sign, but this looks good. And we've got two folks already on, and the room is like filling up. Look at this. You are popular, Phil. You are just bringing them in. Look at this. They're all coming to see you. So you are going to be the expert tonight. Now, see, if I was vocab, I'd do like 4 raps with a drum roll, and I could just like stall really well, right? I did write a poem this year. It's good to get back. At least we can hear you. Say something for him, Phil.
What's up, everybody? Mr. Phil Fox, Drops of Hope Ministries. Good to see y'all.
Okay, well, I'm going to, it's okay to start early. Yes, it is. I'm going to go put up the countdown here. I decided it's okay. This is like my executive decision for the day. Okay, and we are back. I love countdowns with music. That just does it for me. So that is excellent. I have a special guest. I have been wanting to do this for a while and see if you come on my show and you're a special guest. I like to go ahead and do some promo. So let me throw some promo out there. This is where you could get a whole Phil Fox, a fellow minister, brother, and I guess I'd say apologist. And which do you prefer, apologist and evangelist, or apologist and Bible teacher?
It doesn't matter. I sort of dabble in everything: apologetics, teaching ministry, you name it. I'm a jack of all trades, but I'm a master of none. So,
okay. Well, hey, that's not only humble, but it's impressive. So I'll take both of those. Now, you can also find him on Patreon. By the way, a shout out. You Patreon folks have been responsible for the possibility. Well, a Yeti mic is sitting in front of me. I am using a Yeti. By the way, that was recommended by Phil Fox. So Yeti should give him a commission. I definitely think there should be something in his stocking from Yeti. So that's where we're at, but I wanted to throw those up. I will do a little shameless commerce here. Okay. We are with Chosen People. This is a Zion's Banner broadcast, though. Chosen People does not specialize in Native Americans. It specializes in Jewish people, but that's okay because we do more. We don't do less. And I also am Patreon. And you know what? I'm thinking of going to StreamYard. And so you Patreon folks will be helping me with that transition. Let's get away from the shameless commerce and start really talking here. I'm Jewish. I got to do advertisements.
Hey, that's all right, man. That's all
right. Phil is our expert tonight, and I thought it'd be cool as the Hanukkah candles are burning down to ask the question, what is Christmas like through Native American eyes? And so I want to start by letting Phil give his background, because if someone's watching this later on, they're going to say, well, why is he an expert? And so I'm going to allow him to tell us a little bit about his background. Why is this important to you?
Yeah, well, first of all, my name is most of you know me as Mr. Phil Fox. I started a ministry called Drops of Hope Ministry several years ago. It started as sort of a blog type thing, and it sort of morphed into this sort of YouTube universe since it's you know, especially during the pandemic and stuff. But I actually started just before the pandemic and all that. But anyway, I am a full-blooded Native American. I was born and raised on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation in the middle of western North Dakota, and I am part of essentially what are three tribes that were basically put on the same reservation. Two of the tribes were historically pretty much together; they were in close proximity anyway, and then another one of the tribes just happened to show up around the time that the reservation and all the treaties and stuff were being formulated. So those three tribes you probably never heard of them because they're not part of any of the major well-known tribes, mainly because we essentially cooperated. We didn't do a lot of wars with the U.S. government, although we sort of did run away and do some of them type of things. But we're more of just a kind of a needle in the finger, if you will, rather than a big thorn in the side like the Great Sioux Nation was. But yeah, so the three tribes that I come from are the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara tribes, and those three tribes are, like I said, not very famous, but the most people might, or the most that people may have heard of about my tribes is that when Lewis and Clark were pushing west and they went up from St. Louis up the Missouri River, they ran into my tribe. Actually the Mandan camp of my tribe, and the Hidatsas were there too. And it was through the Hidatsa that Lewis and Clark found who you would call Sacagawea. But it's actually pronounced, and it's a Hidatsa word, Sagagawea, which means bird woman. And actually, my mother-in-law that's her given native name is Sagagawea, and yeah, so that's where if you know anything about U.S. history, and you might have heard of it, there's some semi-fiction books and using Sacagawea, what is the normal American vernacular of pronouncing her name. But yeah, her name is Sagagawea. So that's basically our only claim to fame. And I'm born of all three tribes. I'm a mix of all three tribes, a little bit of Pawnee and a little bit of Sioux heritage. But the bulk of my heritage and what I was raised is Hidatsa. So that's what makes me the expert, I guess, with the Native American perspective. But my ministry primarily has been because, and the reason why I named my ministry Drops of Hope Ministries is because sadly on the reservations there is a big sense of hopelessness. And I remember in high school, when I was in high school back in right at the turn of the millennium, in the 2000s, early 2000s, 99, 2000, I graduated in 2002. I remember I was part of the youth leadership, and there was a pandemic, I think they called it a pandemic of suicide going on the Standing Rock Reservation. And some of you might remember Standing Rock from the news from a couple of years ago with the pipeline protest. But at that time, when I was in high school, the Standing Rock Reservation was going through, I think they were having like 1 to 2 suicides a month or a week on their reservation. And this is pretty typical. If you look at a lot of the statistics and the demographic studies and things that are done, reservations are systematically higher in all of your discriminators and a lot of your derogatory statistics. So like suicide rates are like 250% higher than any place in the entire United States, including inner city. and including your heavily depressed areas like where I'm at now in Detroit. There's suicide rate, and then there's the jobless numbers, the lack of education, the lower reading levels. All of those types of things would that would be slam. That would be an epidemic. There you go. Thanks for the correction there. Yeah. So that was something that was a major problem, and that is typical among Native American reservations. So the reason why I named my ministry Drops of Hope Ministries is because the only way to really minister to people is one small step at a time. And so water is a very big thing within our culture. The water, for most tribes, they call it first medicine, and it's a sacred object. Not to the point where they worship it, but they hold it sacred, and it's something that you protect, and it's something that you care for, because it gives life and it helps us produce, and it has so many applications and such. So water was another thing. So Drops of Hope, and then ministries, of course. So that's essentially where I come from and what I do. So my ministry is not necessarily primarily focused upon Native Americans, but I am able to contextualize the gospel in the Native American context, and to help people understand and communicate the gospel message in the area of apologetics, and trying to help people understand the fullness of the gospel, but within the Native American context. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, man. The minute you said gospel, I had to spotlight you. That word just gets my attention. Hey, quick shout out. There's a few folks I know, but they hardly, they're usually not on my station. They're probably doing other vital things. Miss Titus too, just want to say hi. And CBM, the ambassador. I like the ambassador.
Yeah, CMB is a good brother, man. CMB, shout out to you, brother. Miss Titus too. Yeah, go and subscribe. You'll see CMB on a lot of other channels and stuff, but Miss Titus 2's got her own channel too. So shout out to her. Go check her out. Go check out her content. Good stuff.
All right. Yeah, I just like to do that when people actually honor me with their time and their presence. So I wanted to get that there. I thank you for explaining, your ministry vision. I think that's really important. What has grabbed you, and what do you want to see? And so that was really kind of helpful. It was interesting. You have some Sioux, those are names we're more familiar with, although Sacagawea did get her own dollar coin.
Yep.
They discontinued it. I was a little sorry. I got to drive by her grave. It's on reservation territory. I was out in Wyoming, and the pastor drove me by. He said, but we can't go on because you really don't look Native American enough to pass. And so I did not get to actually see the grave, but it was interesting history. So, let's talk a little bit about this. Christmas was a little different for me. And so I want to get a perspective. I guess what I'd like to focus on is first your family. Start the circle small and then work out. Okay. Seems like a logical way. So tell me, Christmas with the Foxes, what was it like?
Well, see, I didn't actually grow up with my Fox side, which is ironic enough, but I grew up with on my mother's side, which was the families are the Hales and the Lone Fights. And that family and my close family. See, when you say start small, Jeff, there's no such thing as a small family when it comes to most Native Americans. We have a different view of our family structure is completely different than the European model of family, and ours is very generational. Is the easiest way I can explain it. And I did go through on my channel some of the family history and how that breaks down. So you can go and check that out if you want to learn a little bit more. But so essentially what happens is all of my grandmother's generation, all of her first cousins and second cousins and such, all of that generation becomes my grandmothers and grandpas. And then going down to my mother's generation, my mother's and father's generation, now there's a little nuance with that, because we have what's called a clanship system, and so this system essentially helps sort of break up your responsibilities for your daily life, raising children and such, because it really is. I think it's an old African proverb that says that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, we literally use that model, and so and hence the generational, kinship system. And so all of my mother's brothers and sisters and see our first cousins or our second cousins, we don't consider them cousins. They are our brothers and sisters. And so my brothers and sisters are basically my entire generation. And then going down, all those are all my nieces and nephews that are the next generation down, or they're, so all of my brothers and sisters that are immediate. And then my cousins, those are, so that's my generation. And then it just continues on the generation below me. Those are all my nieces and nephews. There's no such thing as once removed and all those types of things. So getting to your question of I was raised Catholic, and so we did have a Christian-esque view of Christmas, but just like most American holidays and most of the American perspective, it's really separated out. There wasn't an emphasis on Christ. There's not an emphasis on the importance of Christ and his ministry to us, what he did, the reason why he came. There was really none of that. And my family is, we're not the typical native family. We got a lot of cowboys. My family actually owns a ranch that used to be huge, but now, a lot of the guys grew up and they've got families and they moved off the reservation. So the core family that used to handle the ranch stuff doesn't really do that anymore. But we were always sort of taught and raised with, we celebrated Christmas, we celebrated Easter, we celebrate all these things, but there wasn't an overemphasis on why we did it, which I think is typical with most American families today. It's just another holiday. It's another reason for us to celebrate. It's another reason for us to come together, but which in my immediate family now, the Fox family, as I know it now, is that we're trying to put Christ back into Christmas and really understand why we're celebrating and what the gifts represent, and all of these things is put the nativity story back into Christmas rather than just being about Black Friday and how we can, what we can get and how much we can get and all those types of things. So that's basically my story in a nutshell.
Okay, I'm just gonna click this on here. Nate's liking this, so he said we should collab more. So that's just a little kind of encouragement spur for us. So that's good
for sure.
I kind of appreciate that that point that just because you necessarily grew up in a quasi-Christian family doesn't necessarily mean that you understood the reason for the season.
No.
I think that that's kind of an important point that I think maybe a few folks out there could relate to if they grew up in either a nominal Christian family or a Catholic family. And I was confused because I didn't understand the difference. I thought everybody who was Gentile was Christian if they weren't a Sikh, a Buddhist, or a Hindu, or a Muslim. Yeah. So when I looked at everyone else's Christmas, I thought everybody was doing it the right way.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing for people to hear, because they may have family that is what I call Christo-pagan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's a real thing. I mean, I remember one of my families who, and I say one of my families, a family that I'm very close to. One time, they asked if I would do. I was the assistant pastor at the church that I essentially went on to be the senior pastor, and they asked if I would open up the church and do like a midnight service type of thing. You know how some Catholics do, or some parishes do, like a midnight mass type thing. Bringing in Christmas. And so they asked if I would do that, and I was like, I have no clue what to preach on. I have no clue what to do. We didn't have a band or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, we're talking tiny church. 12 members. 30 on a really special holiday. Like Easter or Christmas or So, but yeah, so I essentially preached this message about essentially putting Christ back into Christmas. And I was just like full on passionate, doing the whole pounding the pulpit and everything. Like, this is supposed to be a light, hearty, let's sing Christmas carols type of thing. But I mean, I took that opportunity to preach Christ and to try to insert Christ right back into his proper position of Lord of Christmas. So.
All right, and yeah, I want to kind of get that in there. You're not really dealing with Mr. Phil Fox. He's an ordained guy, and so that's why I do Brother Bill. That everybody who's ordained or ministers in the Southern Baptist sort of background is brother so and so, unless they're sister so and so. And so I just kind of want to make that out there, and kind of give people a feeling. You've been doing ministry for a while here. And it's funny with people's names, but Susan, aka Slam, was raised nominally Roman Catholic, but she went to Catholic school. I have a friend, Peter, who's Irish. His father was Irish. Do you know that his father didn't know there was an American Revolution? He grew up in Belfast. It wasn't in the history books. They didn't want the Irish getting any ideas from the Americans, so they left it out of their history books. So when his dad came here, he had to figure out that we weren't a colony of Britain any longer, but very, very Catholic. But I appreciate that, being kicked in there, and not everybody has to share their background, but it is interesting to kind of hear.
Oh yeah.
So as we're dealing with this, and that's a complicated thing, understanding the family dynamics of Native Americans.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up with, our family was dysfunctional and Jewish, so it was more fractured. Yeah. I almost feel like that's almost a redundancy. Dysfunctional and Jewish, don't they sort of go together or something?
Yeah. Jeff, you and I are kind of we're kind of the start of a bad joke, right? So they walk onto the street and there's a Jew and an Indian.
A Jew and a Native American were walking together.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, I'm going to ask this because I did get to preach on a Navajo reservation, and I was fascinated. I really kind of enjoyed it. There were places of connection, particularly because they were agricultural. So I could talk about the Lamb of God and trace it through the Old Testament. Since they raised sheep, they kind of really got it better than people in an American church that think sheep come from grocery stores. But Jewish people's religious system and lineage is very patriarchal. If I'm called up to the Torah, I'm called up by my Hebrew name, Ben, and then my father's Hebrew name, son of. My sister would be her Hebrew name, because you're always called up by your Hebrew name, not your English name. And then Bat, which means daughter of. But I noticed the Navajo were matriarchal.
Yeah.
So the lineage went through the mom.
Yeah. Yeah. Most native tribes are matriarchal in their societies. So I mentioned earlier the clanship system. The way our system works is that the easiest way to put it is, while you're here on this earth, your mother's clan takes care of you. And then when you are transitioning from when your body is basically gone, or you die, there's a period of 4 days that your father's clan is responsible for. And this is specifically my tribe, the Hidatsa. This is the way I was raised. So this isn't universal. So I just want to make that clear, because some people might think, oh, okay, well, that's how no, this is just specifically to my tribe, in particular, the Hidatsa. And so we have, according to our clanship system, our father's side, it's both ceremonial and it's functional at the same time. Because imagine the family that has taken care of you their whole life, or your whole life, and now they have to do all of the spiritual, or all of these ceremonial things to prepare you to journey on. So it allows them to that side to grieve. And so then the father's side takes on that responsibility of sort of ushering you in to the next realm. And then so that person, and they sort of, because the custom is, and the traditional belief is that your soul journeys around to familiar places and visits people and those types of things for them 4 days. And on that fourth day, then your soul gets ready then to leave to the happy hunting grounds, is what we commonly call it, or to the other lodge on the other side. And so and there is a real concept. It's sort of a concept like heaven. It's an actual physical place that we go, and actually we are taught that we have to at least understand and know our name. Otherwise, those that have gone on, they will not understand or know who we are, because they don't speak English, especially the old ones who didn't have English in their language, or before, because of course our relatives or whatever, they're there because and they remain there because they were here pre-contact, European contact. So you have to know how to speak your name and say your name. So I was always taught, you have to know your name. You have to understand how to say your name. You have to at least have some greetings, and things like that. So I would say Nidosha, Midishi Mahagadesh, Hetz, Mabisigit, so I would say, hello, my name is Defeats the Enemy. I hope you're having a good day. So I would have to know those things, and in order for, essentially, according to their custom and belief. But yeah, so most tribes, and that's just my example of why my tribe is matriarchal. But historically, most of your tribes are going to be matriarchal, because and and again, even down to most places, or most tribes, the lodge itself is the woman's property. So if a man or the woman, or we didn't have essentially a marriage, but it was more common law type things. We didn't have a marriage ceremony, but there was some agreement, because most tribes, if someone was to get married, the husband would have to pay what's called the bride price. And so they would have to then give up some cattle, or some kind of livestock, or weaponry, or something that they crafted with their hands, or basically to pay the price, to say, look, I'm going to protect them, and she's of value to me. And again, we tend to look at these things in modern American eyes, but it really wasn't a payment per se. It was an honoring type thing, because in most tribal cultures, and this is a misnomer, is that the American view of Native Americans is that we were these big savage people who were just there to stop the American progress, and that's all we did, is we just wanted to burn wagons down and things. But no, historically, we were very giving people, which is why the trade was huge. We were very good at trading, and Christianity and the concept of Christ, we were very open at first. And that's something that's never hardly ever talked about, is that there was a lot of conversions to Christianity. And I know I'm sort of getting off topic, brother, but yeah, so there was a lot of this stuff. So yeah, it is, and historically, and that's what a lot of these tribes and a lot of these things would be, is they would be matriarchal, and they would honor the mother and those types of things. But yeah, so just like in Scripture, there is a different role for each, and again, it depends on what you fall on, or what your view is. If you're more complementarian, you would say, yeah, sure, each person has their own role, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're in odds with each other. But anyway, that's a different subject. But anyhow, so yeah, there is a place, and there is a role for each person to play within the tribe, and then hence the reasons for a lot of our clanship system and those types of things too. So
Okay, that's all right. I kind of knew. There's a lot to share here.
yeah.
I'm gonna kind of pull you down and pull me back in here.
Yeah.
And Miss Titus too. Just thanks. I appreciate that. So I just said glad to have her.
Absolutely.
Wow. I'm comparing that, and I'm just kind of processing that, all the way through. The patriarchal system had some value biblically. I mean, as far as the second Adam and things of that nature, and so it made sense for God to build that in or use that. It just creates an interesting question. I have missionary friends in Papua New Guinea. We've had a lot of discussions around their translators, their Bible translators. Actually, we've had a lot of discussions around equivalence, a conceptual equivalence versus direct translation.
Mm-hmm.
And those sorts of discussions. And I used to have them before they went to the mission field. So that's kind of interesting from that sort of standpoint, is you've got to translate the Bible story in a matriarchal environment when the Bible is actually more patriarchal, and you're going to have to deal with maybe why that is.
Yeah.
But how do Native Americans feel about Christmas?
Well, and see, it's this was in when I was thinking about it, it's really inconsistent, because they're celebrating, essentially, I mean, ultimately what they're doing is celebrating the birth of Christ, but because of how early European Christians, and what I'm discovering now is that it was more of a Catholic concept. This idea of, and I'm going to introduce a term that I'm actually going to be looking at very closely in the next few weeks. I'm going to have Mark Charles on, and he's going to go through what he has coined as, not he, but essentially he breaks down the doctrine of discovery, and how the early Christians, or the early Americans, Catholic Americans, and then later on adopted by Protestants, how they justified their own enslavement and taking of the land and those types of things. And so if we look at that, and like I mentioned earlier, most natives at the very beginning were very open to the gospel message. But it was after the tyranny, and after the bloodshed, and after after getting these things really convoluted, is when people started to resist the gospel, because most of the tribes, even though, yes, they were warring with each other, but it was a war of survival. And the tribes weren't just, yes, they would take spoils of war. And that's how, I mean, to be honest, that's how we got Sacagawea, was because Sacagawea wasn't a natural born Hidatsa. She was actually a Shoshone from the Montana, Wyoming area. The foothills of the Teton Mountains is where the Shoshone historically lived. And so the Hidatsa were in the war with the Shoshone, and they did a sneak attack in the Three Forks area in Montana, and they marched her back to the middle of North Dakota, about 500 miles. And she was like 11 or 12 at that time. So these historical things, like, as we look into these things, like, yes, the people essentially, they became callous to the gospel, and that rough history, even though, yes, we did have that in our past, but again, it was basically just out of survival. They were warring because they wanted to survive. It was shortage of food, so they would go and try to get food from the other ones, or there would be, they would have more goods, so then they would go and try to take their goods from each other. Again, not justifying it, but it was a fight for survival. Now, this whole concept of owning land and all those types of things, that all came from the European doctrine of discovery, where early on, even in the 13th and 14th centuries, the popes were issuing these edicts, or what were called papal bulls, and that's what justified them. And they told them, basically, if you're not white European, then that way you had the justification. And that's where the idea of Christendom came from, was because now you have the papers to say, look, you can go and just get whatever you want from this land, because these are pagan people who need Jesus. And now we can do it by force, because now you have the church who is behind you, because now if and there's more doctrine behind that, but still, that's essentially where the whole doctrine came from. And that's what spoiled it for the natives, is that even though they were open, even though they were, even the first pilgrims, when they came off the boat, they were welcomed with open arms. And it wasn't for a few years down the line, when there was a shortage of food and there was a shortage of goods and things for them to have, and the tribe had to self-preserve, and then the pilgrims were upset because the tribes didn't share with them what was rightfully those. So that it's just that's sort of the beginning of the bad blood. And then so march that on years after years, and then all the Indian wars start, and then the Indian Removal Act, even the beloved Abraham Lincoln, even though he's known as the great emancipator in abolishing slavery, but during that same time, he was still one of the harshest presidents to Native people. He enacted the Homestead Act, which allowed people to homestead lands that weren't theirs, and he also signed off on the bloodiest, or not the bloodiest, but the largest mass execution in the United States history, when he hung the Dakota 38. There was 38 Dakota warriors who were fighting for food. They were fighting to feed themselves and their families. And they did some raids, and yes, they stole, but they were doing it for survival, not just simply for sport or for land expansion. So the who's viewed as the great Abraham Lincoln towards Native people, he's not so grand. So there's all these atrocities that happened throughout history, and there's a lot of this stuff. Let's see. I'm not surprised. Yeah. So Lincoln did not want to end. Yeah. I was reading Michelle Turner's comment. Yeah. But yeah. So yeah, there was all these atrocities that essentially are overlooked, and for Native people, we're supposed to just forgive and forget, live and let live, and but yet there's all of this stuff that happens throughout history, and had happened, and because the gospel was given in this way, and I even hear it now, there's times where I'm arguing even with some pastors that are deeply conservative, and they're like, well, that's how God got the gospel here. You need to be appreciative of that. And I'm like, okay, I mean, that's fine. That's not my beef. But the thing is we still need to understand and know why people are upset, because it's really just not even just that, Jeff. It's really because this is so recent. People think, oh, I mean, you're talking about Abraham Lincoln, Phil. Well, here's the thing, is that I was raised by my grandmother, who was part of the boarding school generation. And so the boarding school generation is a generation that was stripped of their parents. So again, the boarding school system was another creation of the United States government, and it was modeled after the military. And so what they did is they took and stripped the children away and said, look, you need to give your children a good, proper education. If you don't, then you're not going to get the benefits of us being able to provide you with goods and whatnot. See, the reservation system itself, the lands that were, quote, given to us by the United States government so generously, but yet they kept drawing back those lands, but they would use that as leverage and say, look, if you don't give your children to be Americanized, because we're going to give them a proper education, we're going to give them the proper language, we're going to give them the proper dress, then otherwise we're going to withhold all of our stuff and all of our goods and all the things that come out. And so they had no choice. And so what they did is, as soon as they got off the bus from the reservation, they cut their hair and they forced them into Western clothing. And then they were not allowed to speak their language at all. And so that was the model, is that they were going to take the Indian out. They were going to save the savage. And that's literally some of the language that they would use, is they were going to save the savage. And most of these boarding schools were, they were either Catholic or they were some sort of mission school. And so it wasn't even a choice. They were literally brainwashed Christianity. So again, there comes the doctrine of discovery. There is that idea of Christendom, where we have Jesus, so you're going to have Jesus, and if you don't have Jesus, then you're going to go to hell, and you need to come to Jesus now. And false conversions, and people under duress, they're going to say anything to make you stop. So it's that history. So now sorry, Jeff, but getting back to your question, is that, and it has to be set up, unfortunately, these things have to be set up. because most people don't understand, and most people have not, and it's not even, and that's the thing is people need to go back and understand history, history of African Americans in this country, the history of the Native Americans in this country, because a lot of people don't know. They just know what they're fed, and on top of that, a lot of this stuff you're not going to find in the history books. Some of the stories that I know and understand are not going to be in the history books. I just found out literally just 2 years ago about the Dakota 38. I didn't even know that happened. So most people most Native people and that's why I say they're inconsistent, is because they don't realize what Christmas is about. They don't realize that Christmas is about celebrating Christ. But yet most, and I can't say most, but there's a high percentage of Native Americans who absolutely do not, and they would not rock with Christianity. They're actually opposed to it. They're actually hostile towards the gospel. But yet they're dressed up in their, red and white candy cane striped ugly sweater on Christmas morning, singing Silent Night, but yeah, Michelle Turner said I should write a book, but yeah, I really have to plug this. And a lot of this stuff I learned from Unsettling Truth, this book here by Mark Charles and Soong-Chang Rah. Absolutely amazing book. And actually, I'm going to have Mark Charles on my channel on the 10th of January. And he's going to be on talking about this book and a lot of the stuff that I've learned from him, and a lot of stuff that I was suspicious of. But I didn't have a way, I didn't understand where to go with the research and all of that stuff, but he did a phenomenal job in that book. So shameless plug, not even of mine, but of his book, Unsettling Truth. So yeah, so that's your question in a very big, broad scope. But, like I said, some of the stuff, it needs to be cultivated, and we need to understand, just like what we're doing and how you approach apologetics, Jeff. You approach it and you look at ways to contextualize the things that you know and understand and translate that and turn Christ into something you can communicate to your people group. And we all do that in some ways. I mean, because if we're believers, we have family, and I'm sure that we have family that are unbelievers. So we have to find a way to communicate Christ to, on the micro level. And then you can take them same principles and blow them up, and then you can come to a macro level of understanding. And so it is so, but my encouragement to all of us is that we're all essentially apologists. We're all essentially ministers. We're all essentially representatives of Christ. And you don't have to have a degree. You don't have to be Mr. Phil Fox. You don't have to be Dr. Cran. You don't have to be Vocab Malone. You don't have to be Miss Titus 2, or shout out to my sister Michelle Turner, Nate 2D2. I mean, he's doing stuff now. I mean, you don't have to be these crazy characters and have YouTube platforms and all this type of stuff. CMB the Ambassador, all of my favorites, Adam Coleman and BK Apologists and SOC, and there's all of these fantastic urban apologists out there, and apologists in general, that are out there putting in work. But they're the beauty of the urban apologetics group is that they are contextualizing the gospel to really hyper focus it, because there is some really wacky, because Jeff, I'm sure you have some you have a little bit of exposure of the Hebrew Israelites, and And you know, I know that you deal a lot with I forget the Jewish scholar and his name that you did the video yet. Yeah, that was the other thing too. Is I was wondering where your video was yesterday of
Oh,
because I was going to look it up and watch it, and then I seen that it was taken down by the creator or something like that.
yeah. We ran into a problem with trying to get his clips because if I go ahead and take something apart, I want it to be their words. And it's one of the reasons I'm thinking of StreamYard is that I want people to hear a little clip of singers so that it's not Jeff Cran misrepresenting.
Amen.
But I want to just take a minute and relate to a few of the comments out here. Nate says there's a lot to contextualize when bringing the gospel to Native Americans. Let me stick that up there so that Nate gets, you know, I like that. And there is. Let me relate a story from my background. My dad asked me who would hide me when the next Holocaust happened.
Oh, yeah.
Because the German soldiers wore belts that said God wills in German.
Yeah.
And so they wanted to know who would hide me, if my Christian friends would hide me during the next Holocaust.
Yeah.
So, you know, there were those sorts of questions. And I've always wondered if the idea that the church was Israel. See, Israel had land. If the church is Israel, then they get land too. So I've always wondered the effect of replacement theology on the doctrine of discovery. And I think they're connected.
Oh, yeah.
Some people would argue that. But I think once the church becomes a geopolitical entity instead of the body of Christ, it's going to act different.
Bingo.
And so I think that's a large part of it as Catholicism viewed itself as conquering the world for Christ in a physical way. It began to use physical means. And see, our weapons are not physical, but they're spiritual for the taking down of strongholds.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think we have to be careful of, you know, trying to, or, you know, we need to kind of correct that. We're a body. We're not a geopolitical entity.
Yeah. No, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head because, you know, that's where Mr. Charles's critique upon the idea of Christendom comes from. You know, because they've then morphed into allegiance to Christ to allegiance to a governing body. And then that then gave them the power, if you will, in their eyes, you know, because that's where I mentioned there was more doctrine behind that. But, you know, they would say, well, if God ordained the government to essentially discipline these ungodly folks who don't necessarily believe in Christ, then how much more power does the church have to do that enact those same things? So then the just war theory came out of that, where then you're justifying war in the name of Christ, you know, and so those are really the foundational principles of not only the doctrine of discovery, but American exceptionalism. I always forget what the other, there was a painting that captured this idea of it wasn't American exceptionalism, but you can look it up. There's this angel that's flying. It's very oversized, and then you'll see the industrialized West, and then the natives are in like dark mountains in the West, you know, or in the industrialized East is pushing to the West. And I wish yes, Manifest Destiny. Yep, that's right. Slam RN. Yeah, Manifest Destiny is what it's called. And so those doctrines, those early doctrines are really some of the doctrines that the church has adopted, even the Protestant church, even the evangelical church today, you know, because even in my ministry, Jeff, I was a young pastor, and I tell this story a lot because I want people to understand and know that this idea of white supremacy is still alive and kicking. This isn't a 200, 300-year-old doctrine. I was at a conference among Southern Baptist churches, and that was my spiritual upbringing, was in the Southern Baptist Church, and we were considered a small mission church, and we went to this conference of all of these churches throughout North and South Dakota and parts of Montana, and my pastor was proud to tell this story, that there was this young Native American woman convert, and she wanted to dance her traditional dance style in front of the congregation. And so the pastor allowed her to do so. And while my pastor was telling this story, I was standing right with him, and we were all in our glory, praising God. And then I could see the absolute terror in the face of the pastor and his wife. And their exact words were, "You can't do that." And it just, for me, I was a young minister. I was coming up, and it tore my heart out. And I was like, well, why? And they're like, "Yo, you can't do that." And for a long time, what people don't understand is that when when we're talking about these types of things, and and Jeff, redirect me whenever you want me to get off a topic or whatever, because I can ramble. So please don't hesitate. But when you're looking at these things, it affects you in multiple ways that people don't understand, and that's the thing that needs to be brought home, is that when we rely more on our traditional view of Christianity, or our traditional view, and we all have traditions. Servant of Christ Ministries and I did this 2-part series, what we called presuppositional. What do we call it? Presuppositional PT. Presuppositional traumatic scripture disorder is what we called it. And so the whole premise of our thing is that of our study was that everyone brings presuppositions to scripture. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter if you're African American, if you're Jewish, if you're Native American. It doesn't matter. We all bring our own traditions in, and we have to weed through that. We have to weed through all that Hispanic heritage, whatever, all of that. And so we have to continuously shed those things and try to get down to what, presupposition traumatic scripture disorder. Thanks, Sis Michelle Turner. So we all have that shedding to do in order to put the gospel in its proper place. So unfortunately, what this pastor and his wife did is they weren't able to rummage through and strip out their biases, and they imposed, without understanding, their Europeanized view of the gospel, and said that this Native American young lady cannot do that because that's not what Christians do.
Yeah, let me jump in. Okay. Yep. Now, I always leave the names off because these are dear brothers and sisters. I'm like Dragnet. The names are withheld to protect the well-meaning guilty. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when my kids were younger, we did a Christ-centered bar and bat mitzvah. It wasn't, according to Hoyle, but the idea was to be able to invite their grandparents, to have them read a passage in the ancient language sort of thing. And then they got to share with their grandparents. Well, there was a cross up in the church, and I'm inviting my Jewish parents. And so we wanted to basically have the cross come down. And one of the dear sisters felt that if we took the cross down, Jesus couldn't be in the building anymore.
Yeah.
So, there are those sorts of things that you end up dealing with, a little different because Native American churches probably don't have their own movement.
Yeah. Yeah, it's rare. And, unfortunately, there's a lot of over syncretistic thought within Native churches. So, And part of that was the Catholic Church trying to do their best to contextualize the gospel, but what it turned it into is just another, another thing of them sort of convoluting the gospel rather than actually helping to contextualize it. They just adopted some, beadwork on their little holy scarves or what. I'm not even sure what they're called properly, but yeah. So even those types of things, and they, like in my hometown, they created the church looks like what our traditional lodge that we had. We call it an earth lodge, and it's a dome. It's a dome structure, and it has sort of outcropping for the entrance, entrance and exit. So they do those types of things to try to make it relevant or whatever, but there's really no contextualization of the actual mass itself. So it makes it difficult, but yeah, so yeah.
That's an important line, the difference between synchronism and contextualization.
Yeah.
And I remember doing a message for ministry to Muslims on the meadow of orthodoxy. Where do we draw the line?
Yeah.
Because we want to contextualize, but we don't want to give away key components of the truth of the gospel and synchronize those. So there's this tricky balance between contextualization. And by the way, it comes up in Messianic circles too. I'm not the one doing the paper. I think it's Professor Amy Downey, but my dissertation a little, where we start using rabbinical interpretive methods a little too loosely when it comes to scripture instead of the authorial intent. And those sorts of things worry me a little bit when we start getting too into rabbinical methods of interpretation. The guys on my channel know that I'm very big on the authorial intent of scripture. What was the author trying to say when he wrote this? Is our guide. So they've heard authorial intent until probably their ears hurt. But that's Hey, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It was just going to be a small shameless plug to Miss Titus 2 and Michelle Turner. They were on my channel along with the other Bodega ladies, and we did a whole study on the hermeneutical approach, proper hermeneutics and those types of things, and authorial intent was a subject that we hit on pretty good. So go check it out there on my channel as well. So
okay. Yeah, basically, if you look at it, I'm trying to use it in apologetics and take people through the process a little bit more and kind of make it practical for folks when we're looking at this question. How do we look at texts to answer it? Start with the text, the objection, and then look at the text. And I'm probably going to hone that. The little plug, if you haven't regularly subscribed to the station, and even this was worthwhile, you can hit that subscribe button. I don't expect you to be there all the time, especially if Phil's on. You need to be with him, but I wouldn't mind the bell being hit. So, and it's great having other folks on. And you have to define Bodega ladies. I'm glad you did that, because I wouldn't get Michelle Turner and Miss Titus out of the term Bodega ladies.
Yeah. Yeah, they're part of a small subculture has come out of BK Apologists' Friday night gathering that he calls the Bodega.
Okay.
So he calls it Bodega Bible Talk. So he started, and it's sort of becoming a movement almost. So there's a whole Facebook group dedicated to that, 230 plus, I think. Wow. People are on that. And then, he gets a ton of folks that come through. So Miss Titus 2, D New, Dana Owens, Michelle Turner, Shawnee Miller, those are the Bodega ladies. I don't think I'm missing anybody, but yeah, so that and they have their own channel and stuff. So all of this has come out of BK Apologists Bodega Night, which is every Friday at 10 o'clock Eastern. That time may change, but yeah, so he's definitely started a movement. So that's where the Bodega ladies come from. So yeah.
So Slam RN will be visiting you. She just
Yeah.
kind of subbed.
Thank you for the sub. Yeah, come on. Every
Yeah.
Sunday, 4 o'clock Eastern. We go live. I have guests almost every show now. But yeah, we do Bible teaching, many different subjects. We've went on. I've had Dr. Chris Featherstone. Jeff's been on the channel. That was a blast. Jeff dropped some knowledge. So yeah, I definitely had to oblige when he said he wanted to do something today.
Well, I was kind of hoping some folks would go ahead and hit your bell there and get on and do that. I like cross-pollination. I like, we can help each other, and every drop raises the sea. So, so that's really kind of cool. And we all have a different flavor and a little different specialization. I'm not going to specialize in Native American apologetics. I will leave that to you.
Raymond the Large sub too. Thank you so much, guys, for the extra subs. And make sure and go out and check Miss Titus too. And even Michelle has her own channel, A Certain Woman Apologetics. So go check that out too. All kinds of plugs going around here. But yeah, I mean, I'm the same way, Jeff. I mean, I don't consider my channel my channel. It's really God's channel. And the more wealth I can spread, and if we can make this thing, if we can all even up, and get 400,000 subs like Acts 17 Apologetics, I'd be fine with that. I don't have to be the big dog. I don't want more subs than anybody. I just want the gospel to be preached, and I enjoy spending time with my brothers and sisters in Christ, having conversations and sharpening each other's iron. I mean, that's really what it's all about.
Well, and I wanted to do something where I had someone else on for a while, and so this is kind of a dream kind of come true, and it actually worked. This is like now Chris is on here. Chris was a guy I had a hand in seeing lead to the Lord and actually baptized. So I'm always excited when he jumps on here. He's from Vermont, where it's now like snowing and really cold.
Oh yeah.
And so he found me again through this whole thing, and now I'm in touch with a guy who I remember having a hand in. And his wife was the daughter of a mom who went to the church that we originally went to.
Yeah.
So that's just a little history, little generational thing going on with spiritual sons and daughters, kind of. It's cool.
Oh yeah. So I mean, Chris, here's a little encouragement to you, and probably something that Jeff will probably never tell you, but I can guarantee that if Jeff had some if he had some influence in you and he had the opportunity to see you come to Christ, I had that with a friend of mine, and I cannot tell you how encouraging even just being able to reconnect with that person is. So I could tell by Jeff and just him even mentioning you that he is absolutely elated that you are around back in his life, and he can see the spiritual fruit. So I encourage you, brother, just to, keep Jeff in your prayers, and just, give him the highlights of when you have some kind of spiritual, small awakening, or when something hits you. I mean, I don't know if you're doing that now, but I mean, I would just encourage you, because I know that my friend, when I heard that he came to Christ, I mean, it blessed me so much, man. So I know that Jeff is absolutely just overwhelmed with joy to see your growth and all those things. So just keep it up, man, and just make sure you just keep sending him the love too, brother. So just want to encourage you.
I appreciate that. It's true. It's nice to what was it, John, who said that he essentially rejoiced that his children walked in the truth. And I don't think he was talking about all the little kids at home and the nice little woman. I think he was talking spiritual
Amen.
children. So that's really cool. I'm looking over things here. I know that vocab is like the Energizer Bunny, but I begin to fade, especially when I haven't eaten dinner. Not that I need it. I'm carrying around enough spare dinner, but my body seems to think that I do.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of bring things to a head. I think, you shared that Native Americans have a very different view because with the gospel came a sort of imperialism. We could call it that, a sort of imperialism. I'm sorry to hear that about Abraham Lincoln. There are very few presidents that I have any sort of like for. So I don't know what I'll quite do with that. But I guess, someone said if they read their Bible, they wouldn't have trusted any human being. One thing I want to say is it does really affect people when we get nasty. And I'm very strong in my opinions. It's the Mediterranean in me. We put Jews in Germany, and so now we're depressed and we have strong opinions. So, so I have to watch that. But having said that, where's I going with that? Having said that, we need to be kind of careful. And so this is a good type of, I like this cross-pollination.
Oh yeah.
Because it's actually good for me to get that perspective. But I also realize something else too. Not only do we affect people when we act inappropriately, but we're also creatures that have been fed into.
Yeah.
We have ideas fed into us. And so what seems norm may not be so norm.
Yeah.
So maybe the key is that, we need to read chapters like Romans 14 and pursue some of those chapters that deal with handling disagreements between brothers and sisters and how we treat outsiders. And what I mean by outsiders are just those who have not entered into the kingdom. They may be roaming around the edges like I did for a while. Yeah. But they haven't put both feet in yet, sort of thing.
Yeah.
They haven't taken the jump. And so, there's that sort of stuff to be aware of. So that was good to get that perspective. And the idea is to bring the real Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Native Americans probably thought he was a white guy, and I thought he was Swedish or Italian for a long time.
Yeah.
And couldn't figure out why his name wasn't, it just, he looked kind of Swedish.
Yeah.
And so I get that.
It's funny you say that because it's probably one of the biggest things that I battle when it comes to Jesus and even bringing up his name. People, I don't want to hear about that white man's God or all this kind of stuff, and I'm like, well, it's kind of my Acts 17 moment when Paul is there teaching about the unknown God, right? And so I'm like, well, let me tell you about this Jesus. He's probably was about the same skin color as you are. It's not for certain, but pretty good chance he was. And also, Jesus was a tribal man, just like you. He came from the tribe of Judah. We even know what tribe he was. Just like what tribe you are.
Well, no, actually, I don't. Rome kind of trashed all the records, and that's actually useful for me to use with Jewish people.
Oh, you go.
I'll say nobody born today can prove their genealogy, which means Messiah again had to come before 70 AD because they trashed the record house.
Yeah.
So I have to. I'm of the division that has to guess.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that being such a strong lefty and would put me in Benjamin because there are a lot of Benjamin guys that could sling a stone. I haven't tried it myself. So I'm going to look to see if there are any questions out there. But everybody knows you, so maybe they know all the answers already.
They might. Who knows? But if there's any questions, nothing's off limits. I'm I'm an open book, so yeah, so shoot away, fire away. If you got any questions, if I can answer them, I'll answer them. If I can't, then I'll just tell you, I don't know.
I like to do that. It's good for people to be able to ask what they couldn't ask because they don't bump into you on the street.
Yeah.
And then if there are any comments, that everybody's comment's important, but someone made a comment that piggybacked on something you said in such a way as to, shine the light and that facet of the diamond a little brighter.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll go there too. Brother Steve is just absolutely wonderful to me, and he said it was a great history lesson, lots to think about. So I
appreciate that.
There'll be a lot of people looking at their books a little different. Okay. I'm not seeing incredible stuff. I think people were just thrilled to have you on. I was thrilled that this worked. I now know it's possible for me to do this. So this is like exciting. It does work.
Yeah.
Okay. And some new folks. You've got some new subscribers. I had a few folks go ahead and hit that button on me. So
yeah.
That's great. Raymond the Large, I've known. I didn't know his background until tonight real well. I mean, I got from, it looks like Ramon is actually the way it'd be pronounced. So I got that part, but I didn't get the other piece of it. And I think it is great to see Native Americans. Canada calls them First Nations.
Yeah,
I don't
First
know
Nations.
what's nicest.
Yeah.
Spreading the gospel. And I firmly agree. And not just Native Americans, because it sounds like, well, we'd love it if Native Americans were doing it, but it's just kind of nice that Phil bothered to jump in there. And I want to say it's great to see Phil with his calling and ability spreading the gospel too. So, God did go to a certain amount of trouble to get you saved and put you in this ministry. So we might as well just give God a little bit of credit there. Great. And great. So some good things happening out there. Where you are, it is probably much later. Let's see. You're Eastern?
Yeah, I'm Eastern time. Yeah, Chris asked a question. He said, I apologize. I wasn't on the beginning.
Okay.
Did you experience the Matthew divide in the family when you came to Christ? And yeah, I mean, I heard some of those arguments that I was just mentioning, the white man's God, and, why would you do why would you do that? And even my grandmother, who raised me was a bit upset that I didn't go into seminary to be a priest or to be a brother in the Catholic faith. And so I just told her, I said, I love you, Grandma. But I believe that God has me on a certain path. And it was hard to do because even in my culture, you do not contradict, even if you know better, even if they're dead wrong, you don't contradict an elder. You just don't. And but my grandma and I had a certain relationship. And I had to do the same thing with my own mother. She was doing things that she probably shouldn't have been doing, and her life was headed towards a very different path than it is now. And I had to give her that same ultimatum. I had to approach her and say, look, my life is headed towards a certain path. And if you don't want to be a part of that, then I don't need to be in contact with you. That's how serious I am about my faith. And yeah, so, it was very, and the derogatory word, or a derogatory thing that natives would call each other is an apple. You're red on the outside, but you're white on the inside.
Oh.
And so they would say, that they would say, yeah, but your skin is white, but your skin is brown, but you're acting like a white man.
Okay.
because you follow Jesus, or because you're a Jesus guy now, or whatever. So, but yeah, so I mean, it's and if you're ever on my channel, you'll see that this book is always open. This Bible's always open on this table, and I open that to Romans chapter 1 verse 16 is why it's open.
Huh.
And it's every show it'll be open to that. And if it's not this particular Bible, it's going to be a Bible. And that is the verse that I fell in love with. And it is the verse that I have to, sometimes I do have to just read it again and listen to Paul's words and just let them permeate into my soul. Is, I will not be ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God unto salvation to those who would believe, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. And I don't sit and meditate on it and I'll go over and over and over, but I just allow Paul's words to enter into my heart. And I wish and I pray that I could have just a 0.1% of Paul's zeal and passion towards the gospel, and especially how he related in Philippians chapter 3, where he gave all his credentials, gave everything out about how he was circumcised the 8th day, how he was a Hebrew of Hebrews, and he, as to zeal, he persecuted the church, and he had all of these prerequisites to be able to be viewed as holy, or as put up on a pedestal or anything. But yet he said, no, all of that stuff is as a filthy rags. I don't take any of that stuff and elevate myself. I just hope to cling on to Christ. And it's that humility, but yet the boldness in Christ to not be ashamed of the gospel. And that's what I strive for every day, especially when it comes to dealing with a cultural structure that is so rooted within family, and that is so family oriented, because it's almost a stronghold. And people would understand, a lot of people understand that, family comes first. It's drilled in you. But yet, just like you said, the Matthew 5 divide, or the Matthew divide, that thing is, Christ is going to separate, and he's going to pull apart, but he's always going to work it out for the better. So, though, that's my experience. So.
And Slam RN put up Romans 1:16, and I think that's a good place for us to start winding into it. I think that's the place. So I want to thank Slam. She's usually pretty great with links to resources and Bible verses, and some people are just great typers. And so that's a neat story to hear. I'm not taking anything away. My wife grew up in a Christian home, and so I don't want to take anything away from the folks out there that might have grown up with it. Your testimonies are just as important, because she's always felt like, I don't want to share my testimony. Well, that's not true either. That's the wrong way to go about it. I like to say that God's writing an entire library, and our stories are all volumes on the shelf.
Oh, yeah.
In his massive library of grace. So that's really cool. Well, I'm thinking about it by you. I'm thinking about it by me. This has been phenomenal.
Yeah.
By the way, over 100 comments. People are jumping in there. And I think I'm going to go ahead and try to figure out how you see, I know how to get into this situation, but I'm not sure I know how to get out of it. So that's going to be an interesting thing to figure out.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe we can team up again together.
Amen.
Again, let me throw some stuff up there. You've already got some folks, which is really cool. Remember, I'm going to say this. Remember that, the equipment, the things that he gets, the books that he reads, you're a part of his team, and I love my Patreon folks because I've got some of the equipment I've got and stuff. I also love the CPM folks. Okay. I always do that for Steve because he's such a joy. But Phil doesn't necessarily have that umbrella.
No.
So I want to go ahead and stick this back up here. Okay. Because he doesn't have the CPM umbrella. So, he is his own thing completely. So check that out. And Patreon does work.
Yep.
So
yeah, and the thing about Patreon, I normally don't. I've never had anything for giving, and what I would say with Patreon is I would appreciate the support, but please don't let it conflict. If you decide, or if you're entertaining the thought, please don't let it conflict with your local church giving. And there's a lot of people that are doing this, the YouTube, for a living. So reach out to them first, like the Vocab Malones, the BK Apologists. They're actually making more of a living on it than myself. I have a day job, but this sort of helps supplement some of the streaming costs and those types of things. And then we also have brothers like Jeff, who is a missionary, and Apologist in Detroit, who's a missionary in Detroit as well. So consider giving to them first, all of those platforms first, before you would entertain even giving to me, because their well-being is important. So please, 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 if you're entertaining giving to our ministry, I would definitely appreciate it. But please make sure that you look at these others first and then give to them before you would ever give to me, because it's important to keep their ministries going and to keep them moving forward. So thank you if you do consider, and if it crossed your mind, and if not, and if you are looking at, I do appreciate you. So yeah, that'd be the only thing I would say for the Patreon stuff.
I really appreciate those words. Even though this isn't a CPM broadcast, I'm going to not make them look bad here. We really are with them, and they really don't dislike Phil or anything. It's just, they have a different emphasis. So don't think that they're mad at Phil or me for doing this. Okay. I don't know. I'm just going to go back, but I think if you're not Vocab, you're probably getting pretty tired. I know that I just need kind of to sit after doing this.
Yeah.
And Slim was telling us about her keyboard. And let's do this here. Hey, look, everybody loves to be encouraged. CPM umbrella. It means that I'm a missionary with them, but I do some things that aren't particularly Jewish. She asked that. I'm talking to a guy who witnesses to Native Americans. That's not necessarily going to lead unsaved Jewish people to be saved, unless Phil runs into one at the deli. So that's what I mean is, we're official missionaries with them, but Zion's Banner does some things that go beyond CPM. It's like I say, we do more, we don't do less. Okay. So that answers the umbrella, so that she doesn't think that I have a special umbrella that I use. No, it's not like I have a CPM umbrella, but that's just to explain that. I love the grace and peace to you. It's a very New Testament greeting. Okay. Kyros. And I'm a little partial to shalom, but that's just me. Fair enough. And I think we're good. You ready to go get yourself some, I don't know, it's not dinner anymore for you.
Yeah, no, we already ate and got the kids fed, and
wow,
the wife situated. So yeah, we ran early to the grocery store and did all that stuff. So
wow, how do you get your wife situated? Maybe I could get some. No, I'm just teasing. So anyway, so this has been great. Again, this is not the only place you'd find Phil. So check him out.
Yeah.
Michelle Turner likes shalom. Yeah. Well, cool. I can relate to that, and probably can learn something about some other greetings. Chris says it's bedtime. It is in Vermont, and it's cold. They're having like a snowstorm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Vermont is going to be the days when I used to like spend the day shoveling the sidewalk so the plow could hit our mailbox and pile it all in the driveway again. So I know how that is. I will see you guys all soon. You feel ready for me to hit the finish button here?
Yeah, I'm ready. Thank you guys for showing up. Love y'all, all my new friends and some old friends, and grace and peace to all of you. And I hope you have a good rest of your Thursday evening. Be blessed.
Okay. Bye all. And